Welcome back to season 2 of the Owner Seat, formerly the Valicites podcast, where founders, franchisees, and operators step outside from behind the brand and into the numbers, decisions, and the hard calls it takes to grow. This is a show where we talk about cash flow, unit economics, and the messy middle of scaling and being an entrepreneur, a business owner, so you can stay in control of your business instead of letting it run you. Today's guest has lived at the intersection of big tech, transformation, digital transformation, and very real, very local ownership. David Ramos, and yes, I love that last name. David Ramos is a mission-driven technology executive, fractional CTO, entrepreneur, and change agent who's led global platforms for companies like Aetna, CVS, Rakuten, and high-growth startups. And today, he's also the president and owner of one of my favorite brands, StretchLab First Coast, operating multiple studios across Northeast Florida. He's raised board-level funding, led merger and acquisitions, M&A, and exits, and then chose to build something far more personal, a family-owned wellness brand helping people in, say, Augustine Beach, Atlantic Beach, Mandarin. He's all over Northeast Florida, helping people move, feel, and live better. In this episode, we're going to dig in. We're going to go over how a layoff and his personal story led to a leadership reset, how he turned it into a launchpad for StretchLab First Coast. We're going to talk about what it really takes to turn around and scale multiple wellness studios while still leading in tech, how faith, identity, and calling show up when the business punches you in the mouth, and finally, the operating system, people, process, and numbers David uses to run both code and cash flow with intention. David, Mr. Ramos, welcome to the Owner Seat.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So exciting to chat with you. I've been waiting for this moment, just having followed you on LinkedIn. You know, and many of those listening know I'm a big fan of tech, automation, and AI and everything that's going on right now. And what I find fascinating and ultra intriguing is that you're doing that while also being a leader in the wellness and fitness space, an arena that I know well and that I love. But combining the two is very different. Typically, our industry is a little behind the curve when it comes to this innovation, although we're starting to see a shock. But I love that we're going to be able to talk to you, the subject matter expert. So why don't we jump in? Can you take us to that moment where you shifted or maybe blended that global tech exec experience to, you know what? Let's do this as a family. We're going to go own and open StretchLab Studios in Northeast Florida. What's the story? What actually happened?
You know, that entrepreneurial bug has been in me my entire life. From a small kid, I had a paper route. My first job was a paper route.
Wow.
In high school and college, I was building computers and had an IT services
Wow.
company that was helping local businesses and law firms. I had my first child was in college, so it kind of set me down a path where I really honed in on the corporate life, created those opportunities. I stayed in school, finished, and really optimized around that. So it's a bug that ultimately, as I built the career, was looking for opportunities. And a couple of years back, I was at a biotech called Seven Bridges, a genomic data processing. We successfully exited out of that, sold that business. And then my wife and I, we always talked about, having a business. And we used that opportunity to invest that into a business. And I lost my mom a few years back. And
I'm sorry.
one of her real life goals, which she never really got to. She was a lifelong educator, but she always talked about doing a family business. So
Wow.
when we took that approach, when we made that decision to start a business, that was the approach that we decided to take. And, was really kind of doing that in parallel with the corporate life. And earlier this year, I actually was laid off and had that as an opportunity to kind of spend full time in the business. Been doing that, really focused in on the business this year, and we'll continue to do that. But equally as strong as that tech bug in me, I'm a geek.
Yeah.
I'm a data geek. I love it. It's a passion of mine. So it is something that I'll go back to. And I've brought that, as you mentioned, into the business. And that's really where this last six to 9 months has been really focusing in on really getting to the drivers of profitability and cash flow and bringing data, automation, and AI to
Right.
life in this area, which I'm equally as passionate about, is um, how to influence people's well-being, and that's through health and wellness.
Yeah.
Spent a good amount of time with Aetna and CVS and the healthcare side to kind of bring this into the wellness, broad scope wellness and fitness is really a great compliment and is something I'm really, really passionate about and excited to bring all these facets together.
Amazing. Wow. I mean, ton of superpowers there from people leadership. And I could hear the passion. And obviously, I see it from afar through LinkedIn and just your coach mentality. The geek, I love that. I love that you said that, but around tech and how you're talking about automation, AI, and connecting it to financial outcomes, even the operational workflows too that lead to those outcomes, including the team member experience and member experience. That is really cool. I do want to acknowledge, so sorry about your mom. What a powerful story, though, when you think about the legacy, the dreams, and what you're carrying forward with your wife and family with Stretch Labs. And so, I imagine that's just a tough moment, a life event. You have another one with a layoff, and wow, just I want to acknowledge and say how admirable your resiliency and look at the success. And I know you're probably thinking this is just getting started. And so I'd love to continue to unravel that as you were transforming organizations and as a corporate athlete in the corporate arena. What made you realize, you know what? Corporate and you mentioned that bug, that entrepreneur bug that you had. I want to start transforming people. What was that pivot for you? When did that happen?
Yeah, I think it's something that has been building. And definitely there's layers to that. I'd say the one thing that probably brings it all together is my walk with God, my faith. And really I'd say over the last, probably 5 years, I've really felt led. God's called me to serve in a manner, in a ministry that is the marketplace. So how do you do that? How do you bring that type of ministry to bear where you can have the most impact, right? And for me, it is driving business. I've always been like I said, had that engineering bug, been passionate about business, building things, and then health. Our nation, the world has just been really, think about all the disease and really the factors that are influencing health in a negative way. How can you bring to light data, tools, applications into healthcare? And that's really was a big driver for when I kind of transitioned out of Rakuten. I was looking at other big tech opportunities, and I was called to go to Aetna because of the ability to really influence health outcomes. And then when
Right.
it came to my own business, bringing that into wellness. So it's certainly been something that is really, I think, evolved over a period of time.
Yeah.
With like you said, there's certainly been these life events that have really influenced and kind of driven that next stage and that next step
What I
in
love
that
about
evolution and really kind of that
What I
emphasis.
love about your story is the foundation is in your faith, right? It's very easy to go idolize all of these other things or make your identity business or, some other type of thing that, we put on a pedestal and we idolize and realize, no, that has actually it's made for your faith, for God, for Jesus. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation, by the way. And I was wondering if this would ever pop up on the owner seat. I know there's many out there that listen that are people of faith. And what I'm excited to talk to you about too is you have been blessed with this leadership position now in a multi-unit type of way to disciple. How do you do that? I'm actually very curious because I'd love to do more of what you're doing, right? And you get to touch others. Are there any stories or any things that happen in this leadership role that you've been blessed with to be able to touch more people using faith?
Certainly, I mean, that's almost a daily prayer of ours, right? My wife and I is that God will use us, right? In every interaction. So, for me, I'm certainly very open about my faith. But not, I tried to bring it into I try to use that, right, as the guide and the model for how I live my life. And as people ask me, it opens up that opportunity. All right. So you live your life a certain way, whether it's through generosity and giving, whether it's through really just caring for people, or whether it's how you keep moving forward through really difficult challenges. It comes up. What drives you? How do you sustain that? And that's the opportunity, certainly, to have that, to speak to people, to meet people where they are. And as you meet with people and walk with people, they go through things. So how do you pour into them when they're in that, where they're in that space, right? So it's certainly people walk through those challenges, or they see you walk through those challenges. You have so many different opportunities to interact, and bring that aspect and share that.
I love that. I'll say this, and I don't know if there's other owners out there. I'd imagine, David, you probably relate with this, but you mentioned those hard times. Of us owners, studio owners, franchisee, franchisor, again, we put our best foot forward there online, yet we all talk back channel of how messy this can be, how hard, how dark this can
Absolutely.
be. I'll tell you, the way I get from one highlight to the other is through some of those valleys. And I found the only way to get through those valleys is on my knee through prayer. And I say that because I'm hoping that touches someone else as they're probably going through something right now, maybe worrying. It's not in your hands, right? It's not your plan, it's his. And get down on your knees, right? With your family. I love that you said that, by the way, as you do your daily prayer at the table with your kids, before you go to bed at night. I think we need to chat about that more. I think we're at a moment, right, in our culture where I think maybe the pendulum has changed a little bit. I'm happy about that. And I'm glad that we're doing this. And I have hope, even if it's one person out there that hears this, that maybe prayer gives them a little bit more peace and surrender, for sure. So
Absolutely.
you walked into the Stretch Lab. You saw the concept. What was it about it that made you and your family say, all right, this is amazing. This is what we're going to bet on. What was it about the experience?
So funny, the first time, we did a significant amount of due diligence, and it started with exactly that, like, walk into and let's experience what this is. And, born and bred New Yorker. So you got that deep streak of being a skeptic at times, right? So I walked in, and, having been, you know, a multi-sport athlete in high school, having played collegiate Division I football,
What
and
position did you play?
defensive end.
Yes.
Defensive end,
Actually, I love it. I played safety, D3 football though, so you're
um,
you're running me you're running me
D1 is
wide.
not that much different than the D.
It's different, man. You're pancaking me if I ever try to hit you. So,
And then
it's very
I was
different.
the
Don't let him
runt.
fool you guys. This guy will kill me.
Believe me, I was the runt of. Most people look at me and like, wow. And no, I was the runt of the litter there, on the fence one, but I was fast. I was really fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I certainly and has stayed active, right? So I've got lots of injuries, and there were all my tightness, my pain points, my injury points. But I went in there saying, I'm not going to say a word.
Yeah.
I want to see how good, these, and we call our stretch practitioners, or stretch trainers, flexologists, and they're all certified. They come with a certain pedigree, and we have our own training on top. But I got on the bench, and in that session, I was amazed, because through the stretches, and they go, part of our process is to really get that background, understand what your goals are, what you've been through, where the focus is, to build a customized plan. But like I said, for me, like, really trying to understand this is, I'm going to hold back and I'm going to see what it is. But they uncovered, the guy that stretched me uncovered every single issue, right? Man, your hips are super tight, your quads. I mean, he just went through, your back is tight, your shoulder, like, and he went through the list, and I like check. I'm like, I was amazed by the end of this. First, besides the fact of, you know, the stretch was amazing, felt great, that he was able to pinpoint just by working with my body and that one-on-one stretch, I was convinced. Fair degree of injuries. I've been through PT and what have you. So like I said, I know all the stretches to do, all the correlations of, which injuries tie into what areas of tightness,
Right.
and he nailed them all. He nailed them all. First time on the mat, very little background information. So I knew, all right, there's something to this. And the more we dug, the more times that we came, the more owners we went through, the more research we did, it just confirmed that.
So I'm curious. By the way, I could relate with that in so many ways. I remember going to the stretch lab for the first time, and I walked out. I'm like, why? One, I get it because at first I was like, stretching, business for stretching. I'm like, I don't know. And I go through the entire experience just like you. Come out thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be around forever. I'm so glad this is like concept. So good. The experience is great. So for those that haven't tried StretchLab, please go check it out. You're going to feel so much better and realize I'm way too tight. At least I'm like, yeah, I have injuries. I've been tight since like I've been 11. I remember PT telling me, I'm like, just what's wrong with you? I'm like, because I
Mhm.
don't drink water, I don't stretch. Like, it's terrible. So you decide and commit to the concept, and obviously you mentioned it earlier, due diligence. What did that process look like? There's a lot of people that listen to this are thinking about investing in a franchise network, or maybe even have the licenses to expand. And what I hear a lot is just the not having a good understanding of what to do due diligence on. Is that the FDD 19 item 7? Like, what did you go through? And do you mind sharing in a little bit of that process, that due diligence process? And then how about even site selection? And did everything go according to plan for that first location?
Yeah. So it's all of the above. Where, you know, and I get deep into the numbers, so I'll say me, but certainly my wife was heavily involved. And as I said, we partnered initially with my wife's twin sister. She's got an identical twin, and her husband. And then, as we've grown, we brought in other family members. But I did a lot of the deeper research, looking through the FDD, analyzing that, trying to analyze that versus open source numbers. And, coming into, there is certainly a good amount of understanding you bring from the corporate world, right? And corporate finance and name work that I've done due diligence for. I've driven acquisitions. I've been on both sides of that fence. Typically, it was more on the technical due diligence, not on the
Mhm.
financial side, but certainly involved in some of those conversations, and a good understanding. Funny enough, my sidebar, my undergrad is in finance.
Oh, it is. Look at that.
You know, I joke around. Growing up in New York, there's like three core professions. You're either a cop, a banker, or a gangster, right? So, I had a lot of family that came, I had an uncle at a brokerage. My father spent his career at Citibank. So, my uncle having his own brokerage, I got to be on the trading floor.
Wow.
I thought I wanted to do that midway through. I was like, there's no way I want to do this. But I was, bit of a hacker, self-taught.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, I was building computers, and that was kind of a business that I started in high school and carried into college. Yeah, but I'd say that because I, don't understand the financial side, but even understanding when you go through those documents, and there's a ton of documents, and there's a ton of legalese on top of those documents. It's hard to know top to bottom, heads or tails from that. So did as much research as I could do, spoke to as many owners. I think we probably spoke to about 15 different owners,
Wow.
um, which, Stretch and Exponential was great about giving access to those owners. But even with all that research, there's a lot of stuff that you don't uncover until you're actually in it.
Right.
Certainly now, the explosion of large language models like, ChatGPT, Perplexity allow for you to take that FDD and run it through, get a legal analysis, get better market knowledge. Now you've got a lot more tools. So if you're thinking about it now, getting in, I would certainly use AI as a driver for some of this research. It does not, it certainly does not eliminate the need to have those tough conversations with existing owners, understanding where their pain points are, what their backgrounds are. And like I said, as much of that due diligence you're going to do, famous, Mike Tyson line, right? Everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the
Right.
face. Second you open, you're getting punched in the face. So your plan goes out it literally goes out the window.
So walk us through that. Walk us through the messiness. And I'm sure there's a ton of highlights, right? You don't get to the size of your portfolio without really good wins, great people, which we'll get to here in a sec. But I'm curious, yeah, you get to that opening, like what's common as you found through your experience, like what really hits just shit hits the fan? What are those things? For those that are listening, what can they expect? Or maybe on the education side, like educating the audience on, hey, watch out for this. Like we just talked about due diligence. Are you using AI nowadays AI tools like LLMs, Chat, and Copilot to run the FDD through? Have you done that? And you can come up with great questions to ask ownership or the franchisor, a team, right? Or even come up with questions that you ask existing owners. That was such a good best practice, right? So using tools and then those ground truth tough conversations with owners, get the real deal, right? What's going on here? Is this the right thing that I want to invest in and put my capital in, right? And in many cases, personally guarantee some of this capital, which there's a risk associated. So you want to do your due diligence. You're now operating, you're in, it's live. Hopefully construction didn't extend, which it always does, but
And
hopefully
it
didn't
did.
cost more. So what are the other things? What would you recommend that are just the watch out fors? And then as you've expanded, what have you learned from that too?
Well, funny enough, we did the jump in the deep end, right? Which is, a little bit of my style, and maybe even, I got a friend and mentor that says, he's got this saying that's, anybody's strengths over amplified can become the weaknesses, right? So, we actually had an opportunity to purchase three existing struggling studios right as we were opening. So in addition to the challenges of a net new business and opening that, we had been in pre-sales for at that point about 7 months, 7 or 8 months, because our construction did take a bit longer than,
Yeah.
and it was a simple bill.
That's in Florida. What? I mean, there's no rules in Florida. How did that happen?
Everything takes longer than you think, right?
Yeah,
And
it
and there,
does.
yeah, yeah. It's just whatever you think it's going to take 25% longer. If
Yeah.
you budget 25% more.
Mm.
That's be conservative and then add 25% on top. That to me is kind of like one of the first things I'd say. But yeah, we dove in. We basically did our grand opening and took over three studios within a month. So that was like a self-inflicted blow, if you will. But then it's really just understanding, right? I think one of the biggest aha moments when you look, especially you're going through the FDD and you're going through all the financial models. Those models are built and normalized over
Mm.
across the nation, right? Over X number of studios in X number of regions. So it is the most generalized model that you can build. So even as I kind of took that approach and had a financial model going in, just how that really comes to, presents itself in an operational
Mhm.
as you're running in your environment. Where the local factors, where and again, we did a lot of the due diligence in terms of look through and we comb through all the job postings for any kind of similar boutique fitness model, right? Where are we? We also, this is where you live and learn and kind of again, I'll go back to the same strengths and being over amplified. One of the things that we learned and we kind of had to revisit back through as we've done this over the course of about a year and a half to optimize that cash flow. We went in with a very generous, right? Being the believers that we are, that we wanted to really do things differently, but it didn't necessarily match up with the cash flow of the margins of the business based on what we had a model based on the FDD and kind of some research, but how that model actually applied, there was definitely a lot that we had to kind of step back and roll back and live through, right? Because we didn't want to impact people. And, we've had to make a lot of changes. And, there's certainly a lot of different ways you can cut it. I say I'm when I say I is a joint thing, right?
Right.
We really thought about how can we make these changes in the least impactful. As we kind of had to make comp changes, we didn't do a really big rollback. We kind of stepped that through. And then as people kind of churn, and this is kind of one of the big differences that has been learning for me too, is on the corporate side, on the IT side, the tech side, you typically have people for a longer duration, right? It's a career that you can mentor them. I've had people that I've mentored and hired at different companies, different organizations, different stages over a long period of time. You come into the kind of the fitness space, the main street, brick and mortar space. It's much more your employee base is, you know, temporal. It's temporal.
Right.
People are at different stages, and you typically have people, at a stage and they're looking for what's next. So it's how do you mentor and build a team and create leadership with that understanding of people we're typically on one road that's going to fork out, and we're not going to be a long term for everybody,
Right.
even for most. So how do you pour into people and grow people where you're through and up to that stage, and kind of release people. Sometimes they'll come back, but most times they're moving on to a next phase, right?
Right. And I think a lot of the audience can relate with that. I hear that time and time again, just the difficulty, especially in our industry, where the team member and nowadays, and it could be a generational thing, right? And I say that in the lightest way, not in a disrespectful way, but more of a transient gig, right? Whereas in past, right, the 20-year vet was the admired. Now it's the right 20-month vet. It's like, what are you doing next? What are you learning? Right? What are you building up to? So that makes it difficult for the ownership group, the leadership group, right? When you're having to spend a little bit more to find additional talent. And we're going to get into culture right here because as I have followed you, I've noticed that culture and family and community, we talked faith earlier, are so important to you. And I really want to unravel that. And I think it's a big variable as to why you've been and you and your team, your family have been able to build a successful portfolio that, as I was mentioning, is just getting started. I'm curious because you laid out a lot earlier around the opening and just the watch out for. Is there anything that if you can go back, right, still investing in the concept, but is there anything you would do differently? If there's one thing you would do differently, what would that be?
That's a tough question. Certainly, you could say you'd be more conservative, but not 1 and 3 at the same time. But that has also created opportunities, right? It's
Right,
also created in and then with macroeconomics, right? Also having an impact on margins, right? Having multiple support that. There's a lot of little things. I mean, the path that we're on is really I think help drive us through um the understanding, and we're still early in the path. Um,
yeah,
we're
it's
still
exciting.
struggling in a lot of areas. I think the one thing that I would say is a lot of really kind of I won't say boredom. You one of the reasons you go with the franchise, right, is you got a playbook.
Right,
And that playbook comes with, here's how you do that, how you do certain things. And I got like I said, I'm a data geek, right? I'm a super analytical mind. You know, I want to see the data. I think one of the things that didn't really drive fast enough too was getting and building. And unfortunately, with some of the tools that we have, and this is where, like I mentioned earlier, I spent the good part of this year building because wasn't there
right,
was the tools to get that analytical insight to understand the drivers of the business, not anecdotally, like a lot of the playbook will say to do. Obviously, you want to capture that customer feedback, you want to capture that employee feedback. You got a lot of you know snapshot Excel type of reports or very high level metrics again that are you know system-wide metrics that don't necessarily capture what you're doing. So I think the one thing would be really understanding that and building a lightweight analytical system to get
Oh,
to that fine tune understanding from a data driven perspective what's happening. And I'll give you a great example is churn, right? Like member churn. You rely on what people will tell you, but a lot of times, we as I think as humans, we look for the easiest, least confrontational way to back out of some kind of relationship, right?
it's not you. It's
No matter what it type of relationship, right? So what is that easiest thing? A lot of times it's easy to say it's money or it's right. Money's the easiest, finances, going through a rough patch. And certainly, like I mentioned, broader economic, right? What the last year and a half is, 2 years have been, a lot of people going through economic challenges. So
yeah,
certainly not saying that, but it's not to the percentage and the degree, right? So how do you peel that back and understand where it really is that is the issue, or whether there are other drivers? So with some of the analytics that have been able to create and some of the AI, I'm a pure right, like been in data analytics, so I always got to qualify this for people because I say AI. AI is a buzz term, right? And I don't want to get too because I can get in the weeds really fast.
it's all
Um,
good. No, I love it.
I think about an AI is a simplifier for people is kind of three functions, right? It's the the chat GPTs of the world, the large language model. You've got um, what has been your traditional data science, your algorithmic. And then you've got your generative functions, right, that are built off of the combination really of algorithmic, your text and your large language model, which combine to drive. That's where you get the voice, the chat, the image generation, right? It's mapping from those things to, right? That's kind of the simplistic version of this.
That's great.
AI is the term, but the the computative, right, scientific mathematical analysis algorithmic has been around for decades. And I went through that. Now I lost track of where I was saying. Oh, I was going back to the churn piece.
Yeah.
So I built some of the churn models really to understand what are the true behaviors, not necessarily what we're getting anecdotally from what the
Oh,
members telling us, what my
amazing.
team is telling us.
That is so good. And, I spent a lot of time with both franchisees and franchisors, and you're onto something. And I don't think it's anyone's fault, right? I think today the consumer is savvier, the consumer expects things faster. So businesses are then, the need is we need to operate faster. We need to make faster decisions. Many of these franchisors, and this is everyone in the market, and anyone can challenge me, but I've seen it under the hood. It's like, wow, the data analytics, the BI, business intelligence, right? Some of the forecasting is just non-existent. And I think, wow, what are the franchisees doing? What can they do when they don't even have this simple KPI dashboard?
Yeah.
And so I help and go and modernize tech stacks. But man, I love what you're saying because you're building it and coding it. That is not my forte. I'm not the developer. So it's really cool to hear it from your lens and that you're able to do that. And there's platforms that are starting to get better. I'm a big fan of Walla because of their AI investment. There's some others, ABC, MindBody, and I know everyone has different opinions of all of them, but they're all really good. I think just hearing this, though, this is a huge need. You're clearly, and you have the skill set to solve for. And I'm really excited for people to reach out to you because they're like, what the heck are you building? I need that churn model. I need the unit economics KPI dash. And so that's awesome that you're doing that. It's a massive need. I'm glad you walked us through there. You've led teams at Fortune 500 companies in those startup environments. What did you feel like as you started to lead teams in the wellness and fitness space? I always hear, man, it's just a different crowd. It's a different culture and experience. What was that like for you?
It is, but it's not. So what does that mean? Fundamentally, right? Being there as a leader, being present, building people up over that journey, whatever journey and whatever period of time that you have, that looks the same regardless of environment, industry.
Right.
Are there some differences? And certainly, but I think it's just adapting to those. One of the biggest, like I said, is I think about the teams that I had on on the technology side where I built long-term relationship because we're on a similar career journey. For typically when you set your career, you're in that career for certainly a longer period of time, if not the entirety of your career. So you have that ability to kind of coach, create those relationships, whether you're in the same employment window or not, right? I think there's a piece of that just comes naturally to bring and to educate and to, a lot of our teams this is some the first job, right? We have a good percentage of our, especially on our training side, they're typically going to school. Like a lot of our team going to school, going to PT school. So they're doing this while they're going to school. So this is kind of like their first professional experience. You're setting people up. You're kind of pouring into people, holding them accountable, but giving them ability to have some autonomy, um, and kind of creating that relationship. So when it is time for them to move on to the next thing, or you can't take that person. You got to understand this is the time, and this I tie back to faith, right? Like, God brings people into your path for season. That season may be short, may be long,
Oh, yeah.
and it's while think about it while you're there in that season. What can you pour into somebody? And that's how I always approach it.
Yeah.
So certainly, there's ups and downs. There's a lot more. I think you tend to have a lot more difficult discussions in terms of people that just aren't the fit, aren't culturally the right hire, or just are not aligned, what have you. You're having to make quick decision, but it's not that much more, right? Unfortunately, even on the professional side, you run into it. So on the corporate side, I should say. So are there unique aspects? Yes. Do you have a much more transient? Is your that period, a season period, seasonality is much shorter? Absolutely. But do some of the fundamental approach, I think, is the same.
I love that perspective. And you brought up seasons. And, it's funny, as I was hosting the Valicites podcast, which is our AI FP&A platform, I got a lot of feedback is we're loving the conversations around the raw, the real of what franchisors, franchisees, business owners, studio owners are going through. Can you continue that? I'm like, God, it's so spot on. And I love this. And this is why I love chatting with you, David. And you mentioned seasons, and there's a lot of people that I found, and they'll DM me, they'll come and they'll watch the show because they're looking for those best practices because they feel like their backs are up against the wall. They're going through that season that many of us entrepreneurs go through. It's nothing new. You go through those highs and you're on top, all that work that I put in, it's working out. And then boom, economic shock, pandemic, some type of competitor intrusion, construction, as little as that, right? Closing off your main street or what have you, right? There's always something. You talk about seasons, and you took on 3 turnarounds at one time. What's your recommendation as someone's going through that season, or you're going through a turnaround, or you're going through that rough patch? How do you get your team through it? What are you looking at? Maybe that's data or financials. How do you get your team members through that, including maybe the general manager or the studio manager or the personal trainers you were mentioning? How do you get everyone to rally around that?
We're going through a season, right? This year has been a season, right?
Yeah.
And I think, to answer your question, it's transparency.
Mm.
It's transparency and communication. It's we go through, and I brought a lot of my tech practices. It drives some of my team crazy. I bring a lot of tools, and they're like, "Why do we have so many different tools?" And I'm typically like, I only bring the smallest percentage that I think provide the biggest value to you guys. I've got like whatever you see, I've got like 10 times more because that's how I just roll. Right? But it's so I bring some of those, like, we do a stand up. We do a stand up. We now do it twice a week. We were doing it 3 times a week. But it's to align. It's also, we
Yeah.
share numbers. We talk about strategies. We talk about what's working, what's not working. And I'll share it with the team, right? This is the challenge. This is what we're going through. This is what we have to get to. So, you know, there's definitely double side to that, right? There's pros and cons, but
Right.
for me, it's how I approach everything, and it's, what you see is what you get. I'm going to be transparent. Obviously, there's sensitive things that there's only a certain degree, but of what you're gonna, what you should or you can share, but really being and sharing that this is the challenge, this is what we're. And as we win, and as we, it's also about whether in business, whether in life, right? Certainly, it's two things. It's always our human nature is to over index on the negative, right? And
Oh,
allow the negative to overwhelm, and you can lose sight of the small things, the positives, the blessings. So it's always trying to bring those forward and call those out, even in the midst of the challenges. So celebrating the small wins, even if we're still struggling. It's the transparency. But candidly, I'll say if it wasn't for the challenging season, would have never gotten as deep into the business as
I love that.
I've had to get into, and really understanding at a detailed level all the various knobs, right? So understanding how to impact cash flow. What I understand now versus even, at the beginning of this year is light years different. And it's in those challenges, right? When everything's going good, you kind of gloss over some of those things.
Right.
So it's like anything else, right? You don't grow without pain. You don't grow without challenge.
Yeah.
If everything is if you're not going to grow, it's the valley seasons are where you get the growth that allow you to get to the mountaintop in the next season, right? So that's it. And a lot of times it's you gotta encourage yourself, you're encouraging your team, and you're also trying to encourage yourself, but you got to remember those things. And yeah.
I love what you said there. And it's, you hear it a lot from some of the greats, right? Some of the best. And they say that in order to change, there must be change, right? Or you don't change if there's no change. And if you really reflect on that, it's those moments of change, hardship, setbacks, seasons that actually make you grow into a far better version of yourself, or maybe a version of your team, version of your business, other disciple, what have you, right? It's the change that gets us through that point A to point B. Well, I love that your philosophy there, and God, how lucky your team members are as you're going through a season. Thank you, by the way, for sharing that. I think we could all relate with that too in 25. And shoot, I think 26 is going to be a really good one. You talk a lot about numbers too, which I really appreciate about you. You have the minor in finance, right? You're all things tech as
Major in
well.
finance. That was my major.
Oh, that was your major. Got you. A major in
I
finance.
I, I actually looked to do. I was going to do the comp sci, but I went to St. John's. St. John's is
Yeah.
basically a business school and a pharmacy school. And when I looked at their comp sci, it was so antiquated. It was not even worth doing.
Yeah.
And I had a new, fairly young child at the time.
Mhm.
Wasn't going to transfer, lose credits, lose time.
Right.
So I powered through, and
Good for you.
was blessed with the opportunity to kind of get the opportunity to interview for a software development position, which I kind of talked my way into. And when I came out of big tech schools, I was the only one that came out of a business school into a programming.
What an
Yeah.
amazing background. That's huge. And it makes sense why you leverage those skill sets and what you've learned. And you were mentioning hacking earlier, man. We can do a whole nother segment on that. Like, I'd love to just pick your brain and what that looks like as you were building computers and all of that. So in the numbers, right? And this doesn't have to be necessarily for StretchLab, sir, because there's secret sauce and I want to respect that. But as a franchisee, as a franchisor, or even just business owner in general, what would you recommend as you're talking about digging into the business? You mentioned churn earlier, so we'll call that one, right? But is there, 3 to 5 metrics that you're saying in this business, right? What are that? What could those be in the studio world and the fitness world, in your opinion? What do you like to look at?
So churn and attrition is my top priority right now. So I look at that heavily. But if you look at the entire funnel, right? So from your acquisition point, where are you sourcing your prospective customers from?
Oh,
What is that channel costing? What does it cost,
love it.
per lead? What does it cost per acquisition? One of the things that I did earlier this year, which not a lot of people have done. I looked at, and there's a lot of different, we can spend a whole bunch of time, but a big driver for us has been digital marketing, specifically meta marketing. That's the playbook from the franchise. But I looked at the
And
cost.
David, sorry to interrupt you, but when you say meta marketing, you're talking about Meta Facebook
That's right.
marketing. Got it. Okay. Got it. And by the way, for those listening, cost per lead, right? You'll see it as CPL, cost per acquisition to actually acquire a new member. And I love that you brought those up. A lot of franchisors are not even talking about this. So this is gold. So that's why I wanted to interrupt you. This is gold. So
No, no
sorry.
problem.
This is
So,
great.
I looked at it, and early on, it was a great channel for us. Drove a lot of lead volume. We had pretty decent, CPA, CPLs. But as we kind of shifted towards the end of 24 and into this year, the cost per lead just started going through the roof. And at the same time, you think about the quality of the lead. That's essentially how many of those leads do you have to acquire to convert, right? That lead quality was going down, and pretty significantly. I stopped, and then I looked at what we following the playbook. We do a bunch of organic um, events, right?
Ooh.
So partnering with local businesses,
Right.
what we call pop-ups. We send a tent, whether it be other fitness brands or like we have one of our most successful, at our St. Augustine location is with Staples. Standing outside of Staples is Staples and Aldi's. It's one of our biggest drivers of leads. We go out there, we offer free stretches, and then we bring people into the studio. So I looked at what the cost of the organic and the quality of the organic versus what we're getting through digital, and I just abandoned digital altogether. We're starting to add some of that back in with different drivers. Broadly speaking, I think Meta's been what you're seeing in terms of quality is a result of them being so successful that it's just it's very easy. The tools are really robust. The data is really robust. So they are the leader, but that has resulted in a lot of content,
Right.
right? A lot of noise.
Noisy. Yeah.
And consumers are just blowing past the noise and ignoring that noise. So that plus, and I've spent some time Rakuten, what is a big Japanese e-commerce company. I started at an ad tech company. We were pioneers of affiliate marketing. I built all the click tracking systems, I built all the analytics there.
I got
So
to
I
spend more
understand
time with
the
you.
ad tech space
There's just a
really.
ton here. I got to spend more time.
But you think about early .com days, it was all about SEO, right?
Right.
Search engine optimization. Then with the advent of Google AdWords, and then followed that was Meta. It was really became where your paid marketing, right? Whether it's search engine marketing or whether your platform paid marketing like Meta, and that has been for the last probably 8 to 10 years has been the focus of advertising. It's that paid advertising. But now you see the life cycle with AI. Now they're calling it AEO, right?
Yeah. AEO.
Which is essentially, what if you think about an LLM is which when you talk about AI and the ChatGPT, OpenAI, or Grok, or any of it's just an indexing of data, right? It's a semantical indexing of data. So it's pattern based. That's all. That's really all it is. And
Right.
that's where I said that was that one bucket, and then you have the generative after that. So all I do is basically using a search optimization. So it's tuned for the artificial engines. That's the AEO piece of it. So it's kind of going back, right? They'll figure out a way to monetize that, and there'll be some other
Oh, yeah.
paid version of that. But right now, you're seeing that traditional that cycle come back to how you define things on your site, how it's indexed and searchable. It's how the engine, the AI engines are finding it, and you're seeing more and more people are. What do I do if I've got really poor flexibility? And then StretchLab's going to come up because it's indexed that way.
Right.
So anyway, between the eyeballs and the explosion of large language models you're seeing, page, especially on Meta, really decline in quality. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. And by the way, this is an MBA course. We got finance and unit economics, we got tech, we got human capital. Now we're in marketing. This is so good. I didn't expect this, David. So I'm here with you. You said it, geeking out. I'm geeking out right now. So you called it AEO, right? There's SEO, AEO, those that come from marketing. You're following. Those that aren't, look that up. And it's about previously, like using things like Meta or even LinkedIn, right? You're doing some of these ads or geofence type of marketing campaigns. Now it's about not just your frequency of content or content in general, it's what is your copy? You got these large language models, and David just went through it. As they go in and scrape your website, scrape your LinkedIn, scrape whatever you're on, is it coming up with those patterns, and are you going to be brought up more? I just read something, and I'm curious if you saw it. I think OpenAI is actually going this route, or I forget which LLM or which company was doing this, but they're going to do less of the what we search on your website, and it's actually more of a peer recommendation. If there's others talking about you more, the algorithm's actually going to favor that, right? It's going to weight that heavier and say, "Oh yeah, for sure. Yes, we're finding this. It's searchable, but are other people talking about you? If not, that may not be the output that is the right output for whoever's prompting and searching for something."
Hmm.
Really,
Well, and it goes back to, if you think about the large language models, again, it's a semantical,
right. Key word there too,
it's a large
semantical,
volume,
semantic.
semantical, and it's based on reference, right? So how many times it's been referenced kind of brings that relevance piece into it. It's actually not a new model, right? If you think about
Mhm.
Google's rankings,
Right.
their natural rankings are similar, right? How many people are referencing back to your site? But that's how the large language models are
So
essentially
what are
they
your
are.
what are your thoughts? So if we as business owners want to position ourselves for the future, and I'm going to get into agentic here in a little bit, but if we want to position ourselves to be recommended and be the output as people are searching using LLMs, right? And they're seeking guidance on where to go, where to eat, where to stretch, where to work out. What's your recommendation? Is that, I don't know. I don't even know where to go there yet. Is that people are leaving reviews, NPS scores, whether it be Google or Yelp or what have you? Is it some other way that's feeding into the
It's
LLMs?
definitely going to be diversification, right?
Yeah.
Up until this point the we're off topic from where we started on the so let's look back.
Sorry,
We're
my
talking
fault.
about the top of the funnel, but I will answer your question and we can circle back. Everything was really focused in on essentially the two powerhouses, which was Google, right? You think about ratings from Google and, the paid side split between Google and Meta. But with the, large language models, the variety is going to be a driver. So, there's the big focus of the Google ratings. Everyone focused on just on Google because that was driving Google's algorithm. You kind of go to Google for search and ratings, and you see the ads in Meta. Diversifying where your reviews are. I don't think you can just focus on a single source.
Yeah.
It's going to be various it's content providers, how your content is tied back. It's ratings in multiple places, but it's also evolving, right? That
Right.
kind of where we are right now. I think it's rapidly evolving. What it looks like today can be very different a year from now. But it really is having to understand where these drivers are and certainly diversifying out of simply a meta Google approach. If you're
Yeah.
thinking about just those two channels, it's a recipe for getting left behind. And again, it goes back to what is that top of the funnel, right? So if I tied it back, thinking about those metrics is where your you know lead or prospective customers are coming from, and how much that's costing to get in front of those customers,
Mhm.
what it costs you to convert them, what that opportunity costs, how many do you have to see, what your conversion is tell you how many, you start to work backwards.
Right.
And then you think about in terms of Like our business is a membership business. It's a recurring purchase,
Mhm.
whether you're coming in multiple times on a single purchase, or you're buying packs, or you have a monthly membership. It's how that retention, what is that tenure base, and how can you extend that tenure? So looking at those metrics that are tied to that revenue base. Might be different if if you've got a restaurant and it's all about how many people you come in, how long, and how quickly you can turn. Or
Right.
every business can have slightly different metrics. Where you're getting your customers for, what is the amount of time and the average spend
Average spend,
you're
yeah.
getting from that, and how long what is that loyalty, and then obviously you have your operating costs, right? The cash driver, right? How does that relate to your expense side? And that's really where I certainly been spending a lot of the time.
Yeah. And you've been talking about cash flow today too, which I appreciate, and margins since as you're flowing down through the funnel there. I'd love to transition into stacks, right? You obviously have a lot of experience there. But tech stack doesn't necessarily mean, and I think a lot of people sometimes think it's the IT or tech stack, but there's also the finance side of it, right? The finance stack, the sales, right? Point of sale system. Can you walk us through maybe some of your favorites, or where, as a franchisee, where you just don't want to be cheap or skimp out, that because it truly does offers a lot of value to running your business? Any thoughts there? Any opinions?
So that's a great question. I'd say it's going to vary greatly. One thing, and I'll say I learned this the hard way. I think and I come from, like you said, I understand the financial side of it, and I attempted to take on. I had a bookkeeper initially. I do have my CPA, then looking at costs and looking at that versus what I would get from, what I was not able to get from a customized reporting. I said, well, I can just do this myself. That was a huge mistake, right? Trying to take on some of the deeper accounting, using QuickBooks. Certainly, QuickBooks is funny because there's a good user experience that you can do a lot there, but it's deep and you can get really
Right.
customized. But managing those books is a beast unto itself. So that's an area for sure. Where someone like yourself can come in and kind of create that financial strategy, but also then the financial accounting part of it to get you those deeper metrics. When it comes to franchise, a lot of times you buy into whatever stack they have. A lot of what, and this is one of my gripes and complaints that
We
um,
all we all have them. We all have them.
yeah, with to give credit, right? I do have regular conversations with corporate, with the expo
Excellent.
CTO, with their exec staff, sharing what I'm doing, sharing what I built my own stack outside of the traditional stack because while we pay a pretty good tech fee as part of our franchise, I feel like, and this goes back to your earlier point, whether something that's specific to fitness, but I think in the franchise or system in general, it becomes it's like its own ecosystem. Um, where there's not a when you're in that ecosystem, it's about relationships and frankly kickbacks, right? Um, and there's a lot of like best of breed. So I've built end to end automation functions using tooling outside of our stack because of the limitations on the stack. But I've also got some of that expertise that, not every owner is going to have. So that's a long-winded way of not really answering your question.
No, but you did. You did answer it, because I think the sentiment, I think there's always the good, right? And we recognize it, especially when you're coming into a franchise network. There's a lot of things that are set up for you, the playbook, the stack, and all the different partnerships, including, as you get into that real estate aspect too. There's a lot of great things, equipment. But then there are some things, right? And what I love about what you said is there's a culture created where you can actually give your feedback, or even, hey, I have this skill set. Let's just take action, because that's what the needs of the business are. I love that. So no, you answered it for me. That was so good. And I do want to be respectful of your time. I have two, and we might go a little deep on this next one because I'm really curious now. You got me going here, and I know I'm going off on different tangents, but it really is coming together. I promise. I'm seeing something happen right now in the way that consumer spends. I think about large language models. I think about, and this is what keeps me up at night in a fun way, usage based pricing. We think of usage based in our world like the day pass, right? Some call it guest workout fee or whatever we call that, right? Where someone's coming in and they just want to pay that amount, that fee for just that one experience. And then when they come back, they do it again. We live in a world traditionally, historically, our world has always been the 30-day ACH EFT reoccurring dues tap, dues revenue model. I think, and challenge me, and maybe I'm way off, and maybe it's the variable of like wellness and commitment and habits could be the one where I'm missing it, but I'm seeing or I'm hearing that the consumer is going to start going more that route. They're looking for opportunities where it's if I use it, I pay. Only if I use it, I pay. And I think of some of these high volume, low price models where, and there's no disrespect, it just is what it is. Great real estate companies, we sign you up, we sign a lot of people up. And at times it's almost like, I hope you don't show up because that then would increase my R&M costs, CapEx, and all of those things. It just is what it is. And that's nothing new. Now, that the boutique share is a lot different, right? It's utilizations. Like, no, keep coming in because we know that's going to share of wallet, as you were saying, average revenue, per user, per member, dwell time, all of those things are so important in the boutique space, much different. But something, I don't know, I think something's happening. And on the finance side, I'm trying to figure out how do I model this usage-based economy that I think is coming because of AI and Web 3.0 and the digitization of currency, which it's already digital, but blockchain and all of that, there's a ton there around the regulatory aspect that seems to be moving that way. Do you think I'm off? Am I missing something? Or what are your thoughts as you're really entrenched in a lot of this?
That's a great thought. And I do think you're onto something. It is something, like I said, it's been my hyper focus has been on tenure and attrition. I do see a pattern, right? And you know, I can talk a little bit about, and we can, try not to go super deep here. Again, I've built some agentic models and I've built some analytical models around looking at this space for two things. One is to understand that life cycle and what our attrition is and how to understand that, but also specifically and they dovetail together for our case. How do I look at the universe of people that have similar symptoms and similar goals and proactively program them? Like we do that, our trainers do that, but you only have your own experience. How can you enrich that? Right. So my goal is I built these processes. I'm testing a lot of this out. So some of them aren't fully baked. They're kind of in, cool alpha stage, right? And in beta. But how do I look at and provide a blueprint for my trainer then to give them ideas to, as they're having that conversation, to start to program. But where I come back to is I find one of the biggest drivers to our attrition is that disconnect around usage, right?
Oh,
And that recurring. And when especially when you have that challenging, right? And the broader economic, you know, downturns make everybody hyper focus on where the dollars are spent.
price
So how do you
sensitive.
equate
Yeah,
the value? So I do think there might be some, I think about it in terms of how do you continue to prove value and get value. One of the things that I'm coaching my team right now is when we do see that misalignment from usage, let's proactively downsize that membership so we we keep the value bar high, even if a lower share of wallet is, for a longer period of time is better than a cancellation.
absolutely.
Is there a way to kind of take that? I think that it is going to require some fundamental changes to a model. Have that on demand. How do you prioritize that or create? Especially when it comes to fitness, right? Fitness is is not something that you can just mail in, right? Like you know, we've all been there, right? You're trying to lose weight, trying to put on muscles, whatever your goal. You're trying to drive another 10 yard, put another 10 yards on your golf, in your drive. Take couple seconds off your PR, whatever it may be. You're not going to do that showing up once a week, right? So the especially in the fitness arena, the wellness arena, it is about you have to do consistency.
Right.
But how do you do that? Is there a way to do that where you can blend a offline digital
Mm.
artificial intelligence based coaching with the in-person hands-on? I definitely think there's something there.
Yeah.
I don't think I certainly know our model's not set up for that. I think the board fitness wellness space is not aligned necessarily, but do think that there is, if you can figure out what that model is, I do think there will be success with that.
You brought up Meta earlier.
One those two, but it is going to have to be a, if you're not doing it here, you're doing it somewhere. So
Right.
how do you tie those things together? How do you enable that consistency? Because it is a consistency. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be coming in, but if you're not, like we tell our members all the time, we give them homework. If you're not doing the homework, you have to come in more often. You're not going to see the results just coming in once a week, 25 minutes. But if you're coming in once a week, 25 minutes, and you're following a program that we send you at home, you can be successful. You can see results. So how do you blend those two together in a financial model that works? That I don't know. That's a whole other.
It's a good challenge. It's a good challenge. And so for those that are still here and your head didn't explode from some of this stuff, man, this is great. I mean, this is truly gold, David. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited. I'd love to continue chatting about this around usage based. I think you hit on it. Engagement, programming, and how important it is. I think 2026, you're ahead of the game. It's going to be the year of retention. So looking at your churn, attrition, right? It's so important. How are you engaging? How are you increasing that bar of value prop every single time as a coach? You're doing it and you're showing us and you're telling us that is where you need to spend a lot of your time. I'm really excited about that. And I'm curious what agentic workflows do, what this VR space, I think it flew under the radar because of this 3 year of very mainstream LLM, OpenAI just celebrated that, and then the rest of them. I think that's going to happen. And we saw what Meta just came out with. There's something going on there too. I think our environment will still have the physical, but there will be. And I challenge everyone listening, position yourself, start thinking about, maybe not acting on it yet, but thinking about how you're positioning yourself for that virtual space. I think it's going to be definitely an arena that many of us are going to have to figure out, and it will be where your members or future members will be spending time. So how do you meet them? David, you started off with that. How do you meet them where they're at? This was so good. I know there's going to be a ton of questions. David, how can people learn more about you, learn more about your portfolio of Stretch Labs? How can they connect with you?
LinkedIn's probably the easiest. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way. And happy to share my information with you and have it posted out. So
Excellent.
yeah, I love interacting with people, going deep and going into these discussions. I'm an idea. That's my thing. I love to think about problems, solve problems, create ideas. Big believer in well, I don't want to even we'll go into a different tangent there, but a big leadership, a big student of leadership. And Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius is a model that I follow
Yes.
really closely, among others.
So good. Well, thank you for sharing, right? You gave us some great highlights, some great coach and pro tips, as well as the watch out fors. So thank you for
My
that.
pleasure.
I learned a ton. I don't know how I'm going to go to bed tonight. I'm hyper stimulated right now because you got me thinking on a bunch of different levels. So impressed with your background, what you've been able to do, why you're doing it. I think that's the most important, why you're doing this, why your family's doing it. That's really cool. So I hope one day I get to experience what you all are building out there and your outstanding team. And I love that I love that you called it out, that you're you're going through a season with your squad. God, how lucky are they you don't get those moments a lot in your career, especially earlier on. So for those listening that are part of the squad, this is a great moment. Dig in with coach. So good. And as I always say, if you're a founder, franchisor, or multi-unit operator that's looking for someone on the finance side, like fractional CFO, that's what we do, what I do at strategointel.com. So go check us out. And clearly, we have subject matter experts out there, CTOs, fractional CTOs like David.
Yeah.
Shoot, man, you might be getting some calls on building some additional features to the tech stack. So that's exciting. But David, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the
My
owner's seat.
pleasure. Yeah, and if you're ever in the Jacksonville, Northeast Florida area, StretchLab First Coast, look us
Yeah,
up. We're stretchlabfirstcoast.com. We're on all the social, and I also do the fractional CTO work, servant scale. Again, kind of going back to that foundational faith,
yes, sir.
important for me. So servantscale.com as well.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much, sir. Everyone, these episodes go live. If you've missed them, go check them out. Great guests like David every Monday and now Friday at 8 a.m. Central. I'm your host, Albert Ramos. This has been another episode of the Owner Seat. David, everyone listening, thank you so much.
Thank you.